Some stories are made to be told around campfires. These are not those stories. These are the kinds of moments you don't speak of until years later, if you ever speak of them at all. Tonight, we go through 7 true horror stories that will keep you awake, because when the lights go out, the mind starts to wander. And sometimes, it's right. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Echoes After Midnight and turn on all notifications so you never miss the next time we turn out the lights together. This is Echoes After Midnight. Story 1, The Man in the Library Basement. It was my second semester working as a student assistant at my university library. My job was mostly quiet, just shelving books and keeping the front desk. But one of my shifts fell on Friday nights, and that meant being the last person in the building before it closed at 10 p.m. That Friday night was cold, and the library was practically empty. Around 9:45, my supervisor left early for the weekend and told me to lock up after doing a final floor check. I didn't mind, I'd done it a dozen times. The main floors were easy, but the basement was another story. We called it archive storage. Old books, microfilm, newspapers, and boxes no one touched for years. The lights were motion activated, and some of them didn't work, so parts of the basement stayed in permanent shadow. I grabbed my flashlight and took the stairs down. Halfway through my sweep, I heard a footstep behind me. I froze. No one else was supposed to be here. I turned, just darkness, rows of shelves stretching out like narrow tunnels. I called out, "Hello." Nothing, not even an echo. I brushed it off, telling myself it was the sound of my own movement echoing. But then, as I turned down the next aisle, I saw movement, a shape ducking behind the far shelf. My first thought was that maybe a student had stayed hidden past closing. I stepped closer, shining my flashlight. "The library's closing. You need to head upstairs," I said. No answer. When I reached the end of the aisle, there was no one. Just stacks of dusty books and old boxes. But now my flashlight beam caught something on the floor, a shoe print in the dust, fresh, leading deeper into the storage area. I followed them, each step slower than the last. The air felt heavier here. That's when I noticed something else. The lights behind me were going out. One by one, click, click, click. I spun around, thinking maybe the motion sensors just weren't picking me up. But the lights weren't just dimming, they were shutting off entirely. The basement door at the far end was now barely visible. I turned back toward the footprints and stopped. They ended at a wall, but there was a door in that wall, one I'd never seen before. It was painted the same color as the concrete, almost invisible. No knob, just a handle recessed into the surface. I hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside was a small maintenance closet, and a man standing in the corner, facing the wall. He didn't react at first, just kept facing the wall. I stammered, "Sir, the library's closed." Then, slowly, he turned, his head toward me, not his body, just his head, and smiled. His eyes looked ... wrong, wide, bright, too bright. I backed up, heart hammering. He took one slow step forward, and I bolted. I don't remember running up the stairs, but I remember slamming the basement door shut and locking it. I called campus security, who searched the basement and found nothing. No man, no footprints, not even that hidden door. The next Monday, I went down with my supervisor to prove it was there. The wall was solid concrete, no door, no closet, but there was a single dusty footprint facing the wall. The library basement had walls that swallowed secrets, but some encounters don't need walls to trap you. Sometimes, all it takes is a locked door. Story 2, The Wrong Passenger. I work as a rideshare driver to help pay for college, mostly during the evenings when demand is high. That night, it was raining hard, and rides were coming in non-stop. Around 11:30 p.m., I got a request from a woman named Melissa. Pickup was at a small, dimly lit street on the edge of town. When I pulled up, I saw someone already waiting on the curb, holding a black umbrella. They were standing perfectly still, facing away from me. I rolled down the window a bit and called out, "Melissa." No answer. I double-checked the app. It showed I had arrived. I called her phone, and from under the umbrella, the person slowly turned and began walking toward the car. I noticed something strange. They were barefoot, even in the freezing rain. They opened the back door and slid in without a word. "Melissa?" I asked again. Silence. The only sound was the rain against the car. Their face was shadowed, but I could tell they were staring at the back of my head. I started driving toward the pin location the app had for the drop-off. It was about 15 minutes away, but the route took us through a stretch of road with no streetlights. As we left the main streets behind, I caught a glimpse of their reflection in the rearview mirror. Their head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and their mouth was smiling, wide, too wide. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. Confused, I answered. She said, "Hi, I'm outside. I think you drove past me." I glanced in the mirror. Again, the person in my back seat hadn't moved. I slammed the brakes, spun around, and the back seat was empty. The door was still locked. The seat was wet, as if someone had been sitting there. Heart pounding, I drove straight back to the pickup. Point. And there she was, the real Melissa, standing under a streetlight with a blue raincoat and suitcase. Definitely not the person I had picked up. I told her there was a mix-up and cancelled the ride, speeding off before she could ask more. I didn't take any more rides that night. The next morning, when I checked my car, the wet patch on the back seat was still there, and the seatbelt ... was buckled. A stranger in your car is bad enough, but when they're in your home and they never leave, the danger doesn't knock ... It waits above you. Story 3. The apartment above. When I first moved into my apartment, one of the things I liked most was that I had no upstairs neighbor. My unit was on the top floor, and the space above me was just an unused attic. Quiet, peaceful. For the first 3 months, it stayed that way. But one night, while lying in bed around 2 a.m., I heard something, footsteps directly above me. At first, I thought maybe the building manager was checking something in the attic, but the steps were slow, deliberate, and went back and forth for almost an hour. The next morning, I asked the manager if someone had been up there. He shook his head. "No one's been in that attic for years. Keys are in my office." A week later, I woke up to the same footsteps. This time, they stopped right above my bedroom and stayed there. No movement, just ... wait. I decided to investigate. The attic access was at the end of the hall. When I opened the door, a rush of cold air hit me. My flashlight beam cut through the dust, showing nothing but old boxes and insulation. Halfway in, I heard it. The sound of someone exhaling right behind me. I spun around, but the beam lit only dust swirling in the air. I backed out slowly and shut the door. For the next month, I tried to ignore the noises, telling myself it was old pipes, settling wood, anything but footsteps. Then one night, I woke to the sound of furniture dragging above me. I froze, listening as the scraping moved across the ceiling, stopping directly overhead. The next morning, I asked the manager again. He frowned and pulled out the attic keys. "If it'll make you feel better, we'll check together." We climbed up, and at first it was empty. But in the far corner, behind a stack of boxes, was a mattress. It was damp, stained, and on top of it was a small pile of photos. They were all of me, sitting on my couch, cooking in the kitchen, sleeping in bed. The manager changed the locks. To the attic that day. That night, the footsteps started again. When something shares your space without permission, you feel it. But in some places, the danger doesn't share at all. It takes, like a motel room, and the call you should never answer. Story 4. The motel room call last winter. I was driving cross-country and stopped at a cheap roadside motel for the night. It was almost midnight, and the front desk clerk, an older man with deep-set eyes, handed me the key to room 6. He gave me a strange look as I turned to leave, but didn't say anything. The room was small, but clean enough. I locked the door, set my bag down, and got ready for bed. Around 1:30 a.m., the motel phone rang. Half asleep, I picked it up. A man's voice said, "Whatever you do, don't look outside your window." I sat there for a moment, confused, and asked who it was. The line went dead. My first thought was that it was a prank. But the way he said it didn't feel like a joke. Curiosity got the better of me. The curtains were already closed, so I pulled them open just a few inches. Outside, in the dim glow of the parking lot lights, a man was standing directly in front of my window. His face was pale, and he didn't blink. He just stared up at me. I jumped back, heart racing, and shut the curtains. I called the front desk, but no one answered. When I looked again, he was gone. I barely slept, keeping the lights on until morning. When I checked out, I mentioned it to the clerk. His face went pale. "You were in room 6, he asked quietly. I nodded. He told me the last person to stay in that room, a woman traveling alone, had gone missing a few months earlier. Security cameras showed her standing at her window, speaking to someone outside. But no one else was visible on the footage. I didn't wait around to ask more questions. I just left. That night, halfway to my next destination, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It said, "You looked." Some warnings come too late. Others arrive before you even know you're in danger. And if you see her at the bus stop, don't sit down. Story 5. The woman at the bus stop. I was coming home late from work, just after 11 p.m., and the last bus was running behind schedule. The stop was empty, except for one woman sitting at the far end of the bench. She was dressed in an old-fashioned grey coat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I sat down a few seats away and nodded politely. She didn't respond. She didn't even look at me, just stared straight ahead at the dark road. After a few minutes, I tried to make small talk, mentioning the cold weather. Without turning her head, she said quietly, "It's warmer where I'm going." Something about the way she said it made the hairs on my neck stand up. The bus finally arrived, brakes squealing. I stood to board, but when I turned to glance at her, the bench was empty. I froze, looking around. She couldn't have walked away. The stop was in the middle of a long open block, No alleys, no turns. Confused, I got on the bus. I took a seat near the back, and as we pulled away, I glanced out the window. There she was, standing under the streetlight again, watching the bus leave. Her head turned slowly to follow me as we passed. When I got home, I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the light. But the next night, I worked late again, and as I approached the same bus stop, she was there. Same grey coat, same folded hands, same seat. Only this time, the seat next to her was empty, and she patted it, smiling at me. I took the long way home instead. Story 6. The man at the 3rd mile. I'd been driving the same rural stretch of highway for 12 years. My job wasn't glamorous, delivering medical supplies between small clinics and pharmacies in the northern counties, but it paid, and it kept me on the road, which I didn't mind. Most nights, I could go the entire route without seeing another living soul. That was part of the appeal. The road and I had an understanding. I kept moving, and it kept its secrets. That changed in late October, 3 years ago. It was a Thursday night, right around 2 a.m., and I was headed south on County Route 84. A thin black ribbon through the pines. There was no moon, just my headlights carving a cone through the dark. The air had that damp bite that meant frost was coming, and my thermos coffee had gone lukewarm. I was passing the marker I always called the 3rd mile, not because it was 3 miles from anywhere, but because 3 battered old mailboxes sat crooked on the right shoulder, the names on them long worn away. I'd passed them hundreds of times, but that night someone was standing beside them. He was tall, too tall, maybe, for how thin he was. His coat, or what I thought was a coat, hung all the way to his shins, heavy and shapeless, like it was weighted at the bottom. His head was bare, his hair the same pale, grey-white as the gravel dust around the mailboxes. He didn't stick out a thumb, didn't wave. He just stood with his arms straight down, his face turned toward me though. I couldn't make out the details. Instinct told me to keep going, and I did. I told myself it was a farmer, a hunter, a night owl out for air. But my gut felt wrong. It felt like I'd just driven past something that wasn't supposed to be there the next night. Friday, I told myself I'd imagined him, but as I came down 84 and the mailboxes came into view, he was there again. Same spot, same pose, still watching. I slowed, this time, against my better judgment. My high beams washed over him, and I saw that what I'd taken for a coat was something else entirely, not fabric, but layers. Sheets of something stiff, overlapping, like bark or scales, each one glinting in the light before swallowing the glare again. I didn't stop. I sped up and told myself I'd laugh about it at the next gas station, but I didn't laugh. On Saturday night, I took a different route. It added 20 minutes, but I didn't care. I told myself it was nothing, just some weird guy, maybe on something, maybe just eccentric. But Monday, the dispatcher sent me back on 84. I hit the 3rd mile at 2:04 a.m. and the shoulder was empty, except for the mailboxes and the fact that one of them, the middle one, was open, hanging down like a loose jaw. I didn't see him again for almost a week. When I did, it was pouring rain, my wipers barely keeping up. I'd been driving in that tunnel vision state you get after hours in bad weather, so it took me a moment to realize I was at the 3rd mile. He was standing in the road this time, not on the shoulder, dead center, just beyond the sweep of my lights. His head tilted forward like he was looking at his own feet. I laid on the horn, the sound swallowed. By the rain, and swerved around him hard enough to make the van lurch. In my rear view, for a split second, I thought I saw him turn his head to follow me. It got worse after that once. He was waiting at the 3rd mile as usual, but when I passed him, I saw in my mirror that he'd stepped into the road behind me. Just one step. And then my radio, which had been hissing with the usual static between stations, clicked off. The silence was so sudden it made my ears ring. Another time, I was late leaving base, and it was nearly 3 when I reached the 3rd mile. I was tense, gripping the wheel, eyes darting from the road to the shoulder. And then my headlights died, just gone. The engine kept running, the dash lights still glowed, but the road ahead was pure black. I hit the brakes, heart hammering, and in that instant before I slammed the hazards on, the darkness ahead seemed to bend just a little, like someone was shifting their weight in it. The beams flicked back on a heartbeat later. The road was empty. The last time I saw him was a Tuesday, cold enough for my breath to fog the inside of the cab. The air felt charged, like before a storm, but the sky was clear. I came over the rise before the 3rd mile, and I knew, before I saw the mailboxes, that he was there. Only he wasn't beside them. He was closer, maybe 20 feet from the center line. His head was still down, but I could see his mouth now, moving just enough to catch the light. I slowed to a crawl. It's hard to explain, but it wasn't that I wanted to stop. It was that stopping felt inevitable, like it had already been decided. I rolled the van to a halt, engine idling, my headlights painting him in flat yellow. His coat, the layered thing, shifted, and I realized I was wrong again. It wasn't bark or scales, it was paper. Dozens, maybe hundreds of sheets of paper, stitched together, edge to edge, each one dark with rain or age. He raised his head, his eyes caught the light like a cat's, and his mouth moved again, slow and precise. I couldn't hear the words over the rumble of the van, but I knew he was saying my name. I hit the gas so hard, the tires spun, and I didn't stop until the clinic lights were in view. I ran the delivery inside, signed whatever. They shoved at me and told them I'd be skipping the rest of my route. I didn't take 84 again, not at night, not ever. 2 months later, a new driver asked me why. I told him it was a rough stretch, bad shoulders, black ice. He nodded, said he could handle it. He lasted 3 runs. On the 4th, dispatch found the van idling at the 3rd mile, driver's door open, hazard lights clicking in the dark. They never found him. Story 7. The lights under Black Hollow. You don't drive through Black Hollow unless you have to. That's something I learned from my father, who learned it from his father before him. There are faster roads, safer roads, brighter roads. Black Hollow isn't famous for its curves or its potholes. It's famous for what people see there, and for what doesn't come back out. I didn't believe any of that until last winter. I was hauling a flatbed of timber to a mill to Towns. A snowstorm was crawling down from the north, and the dispatcher told me to get moving if I wanted to beat it. Normally, I'd take the interstate loop, but there'd been an accident, a tanker jackknifed, traffic backed for miles. My only real alternative was County Road 6, which meant cutting straight through Black Hollow. I told myself I was being rational. I didn't want to sit in traffic for hours, and the snow was already flurrying. I'd never seen anything on that road that couldn't be explained away as fog or headlights. The stories about lights in the trees, about voices under the ground, were just country's superstition. By the time I reached the hollow's edge, the snow was coming in sideways. The road narrowed and dipped into the valley, the pines closing in tight on both sides. My high beams turned the flakes into a white tunnel, and my wipers fought to keep the glass clear. A mile in, the CB radio crackled. No call sign, no channel chatter, just a voice, faint under static. "Turn your lights off." I thought it was a prank. I didn't touch the switch. The voice came again, louder this time, over the hum of the tires. "Turn them off, or they'll see you." I grabbed the mic. Who is this? Nothing. Just snow, and the hiss of the signal fading. Half a mile later, I saw the first light. It wasn't a car. It wasn't even on the road. It was hanging in the trees. To my right, 15 feet up, a pale yellow orb, swaying gently as though tied to a branch. I slowed down, squinting through the storm. The light moved, not just swaying, sliding, weaving between the trunks, keeping pace with me. My skin prickled. I hit the gas. The light stayed with me, floating easily through the trees, no matter how fast I went. And then another appeared on the left side of the road. And another. They were pale, almost the color of lantern flame, but too steady, too cold. I'd heard the stories about the Watchers. That's what locals called them. Lights that followed you through the hollow, bobbing in the tree line, until they decided you'd gone far enough. Sometimes they vanished. Sometimes they came closer. That night, they came closer. One drifted down toward the ditch, so near the road I could see the snow swirling through it, except no. The flakes didn't pass through. They vanished into it, swallowed like sparks in water. The CB hissed again. The same voice, urgent now. "Kill the lights. Do it now." I flicked the switch. The headlights died, and the hollow went black except for the orbs. And in that blackness, I realized they weren't lights. They had eyes, dozens of them, peering from the tree line, glowing with that pale yellow burn. They didn't blink. They didn't sway in the wind. They watched. And as my eyes adjusted, I saw shapes in the dark behind them, tall, too thin, wrong in the joints. The glow lit only their faces, if you could call them faces, pale and sharp and still. My foot froze on the accelerator. Something primal told me that movement would draw them closer. The radio crackled a third time. This time the voice wasn't faint. It was right in my cab, as if the speaker were pressed against my ear. "Don't look away." I stared straight ahead, hands locked on the wheel. The orbs held their distance, watching. The snow eased, and the silence deepened until I could hear my own pulse. After what felt like minutes, the voice returned, softer. "Drive." I eased the truck forward. The eyes followed, but didn't approach. The road curved, and the pines began. Too thin. One by one, the lights slipped back into the forest and vanished, until I was alone again in the dark. I didn't stop until I cleared the hollow and saw the lights of the mill on the horizon. I called a dispatcher, told him I'd be taking the interstate home no matter how long it took. He didn't argue. 2 weeks later, I broke that promise. We had a run that couldn't wait. Medical-grade wood for a surgical table, and the interstate was closed for plowing. Black Hollow was the only option. The night was clear, the snow packed down. I told myself it had been a trick of the storm, headlights on low branches, nerves playing me for a fool. I made it 5 miles in before I saw the first light. Only this time, it wasn't in the trees. It was dead center in the road, hovering at hood height, motionless. I slowed. The light didn't move. As I crept closer, it retreated, not drifting back, but snapping to a new spot further down the road. 10 yards, 20, always the same distance ahead. I followed it without meaning to. The way you follow a tail light in heavy fog. The CB was silent. The woods were silent. My tires on the snow sounded too loud, like I was disturbing something. That had been perfectly still for too long. The road dropped into the hollow's deepest cut, where the banks rose on either side like walls. The light stopped there, hanging above the center line. I stopped to dot the engine, idled. My breath fogged the cab. The lights sank lower, slow and deliberate, until it was level with my windshield. I could see now that it wasn't a sphere at all. It was an opening, a round hole in the air, edges shimmering like heat, and beyond it, nothing, not black, not shadow, nothing. From that nothing, a hand emerged. It was long-fingered, jointed wrong, the skin too pale and too smooth. It rested on the edge of the opening, as if testing the air. Then it curled, beckoning once. The voice came again, so close I felt it in my teeth. Come, see. I slammed the truck into reverse, and didn't stop until I was out of the hollow. I never drove through again, but sometimes, late at night, parked in my driveway, I see a pale glow moving at the edge of my woods. It never comes closer than the third pine, and I never turn my lights off. Not all horrors hide in shadows. Some sit in plain sight, in the back of a car, on the floor above you, or waiting patiently under a streetlight. If you've ever had a moment where your breath caught and your instincts screamed to run, tell your story in the comments. Someone here will understand. And if you think you're safe tonight, remember, you don't have to look out the window for something to be looking back. This is Echoes After Midnight, and the night is far from over.